Hey guys, my name's Pete, and I'm one of the pastors here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's gonna be a really good morning, powerful morning, and just some good stuff going on. We're finishing up a series of talks we've been doing for the last 5 weeks. And before I get into that, or just kind of leading into it, I suppose, so this maybe like a week ago or so, I'm driving and I'm listening to some music, and that's what I do. Holy smokes! All right, all right. Hey, I don't know what that was. So I was driving in my car this week, and I put on some music, and of course, I'm a pastor, so it was Gregorian chanted prayers. It's like pop punk music or something. And like these playlists that I would throw on when I'm in the mood. And a song comes on, and you ever have that moment where like the music is, like you're familiar with it, you've heard it a lot, you're just kind of playing it back in your head. And there's a song, and it's not, I don't know it super well, but it was popular for a while. The song is basically a joke. It's kind of funny. And it sings about this woman who was raised and grew up in the 80s. We got any 80s people in here? Any 80s? Yeah, there's a few of you. And essentially, the song sings about how she's now no longer in the 80s, and she's grown up, and now she drives a minivan, and her kids don't think she's cool. And she doesn't like the culture, the music. I mean, she just wishes she could go back in time because she is still preoccupied with 1985. And so I'm singing along to this song, and I had this moment, though, as I'm listening to it, where just, kind of brain this thing, and then like, brain's like, hold on a second, I have a question. I'm like, what? And I'm like, what? When was that song written? Because as I'm listening to it, I can't help but feel like I'm kind of saying, like, oh, what a pathetic loser. And then I'm like, when was it? So I pushed my phone, and it pops up there on Spotify, and it said, released in 2004. So I'm like, oh, it's not that long ago. I'm good. And then Braden's like, hold on a second, Pete. Let's do a little bit of math. I'm like, I don't want to do math right now. But Braden starts going. He's like, so 1985 to 2004 was 19 years. I'm like, where are you going with this, Brain? 2004 to 2024 was 20 years. What are you implying? And I was like, okay, wait, so you're singing a song right now making fun of a woman who was stuck in the past because it was 19 years, but the song you're listening to singing along was 20 years. I'm like, get to the point, Brain. And he said, you are that woman. No. It's so true. I'm stuck in the past. It's not, I couldn't tell you a single song that was written in the last decade that wasn't like, Jesus music. I don't know what's cool on the interwebs these days. I have no idea why all the youngins are growing their hair out all long and shaggy. I'm like, no, keep it tight, boys, come on. Like we did in 2000. I don't know. I like, there's a part of me that likes the past, but I want you to understand, I'm not unreasonable about it, okay? I am a very logical person. And the reason I'm this way is because music today sucks. But it was awesome when I was younger. It's just the truth, people. So I get it. But what's even more so, though, is it's not just that music today is terrible. And that music, when it is, but that music when I was younger was awesome. It was that I was part of the music, man. Like I was in a band when I was younger. I played guitar and sang, and we'd tour and do like when music was music, man. It was awesome. And when I was younger, in my early 2000s, in fact, I was thinking this week as I was just sort of reminiscing, and when I was like maybe 22, 23, we were playing together. And I remember there was this one show that we got to do, like a big Christian rock show with these bands that were cool back then, like Skillet and Reliant K and some others. And I actually found a picture of it, and it like brought back memories. Like, oh, dude, like, oh man, yes. The passion, the music, the frosted tips in the hair. Glory days, people, glory days. And I remember looking at that picture recently, I'm like, oh, dude, man, it was so good in the past. And now, here's the deal. Some of you may notice something. They might look at that like, Pete, not only are you kind of stuck in the past musically, your fashion sense hasn't really changed either, has it? You're still wearing black shirts with collars on it 21 years later from 2003. And I just, for, it's the same shirt. This shirt is 21 years old, people. 21 years old. Now, you might be wanting to give me the benefit of the doubt. Like, I bet, okay, he's a silly guy. He probably went into his, garage and pulled it out of some old box to be funny today. Here's another picture of me preaching here 6 weeks ago. Yep. I wear it all the time. I'm like, don't you judge me, people. Don't you judge me. I know some of you people, you're just as stuck in the past as I am. It's a shirt. Yeah. Well, then really, that's true. It is just a shirt, right? And the reality is, look, if you're still into, rocking emo from 2004, or you're still quoting Dumb and Dumber from 1994, yes, that was 30 years ago. If you're wearing a shirt that you bought during the George W. Bush administration, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. All right, whatever. We all kind of do it. However, I do believe that there needs to be a little bit of caution, a little bit of sort of, let's pause a moment and allow ourselves to ask a question, not just about like maybe, okay, my shirt or something, but as people who live our lives and as a church, there's something intoxicating about the past. There's something comfortable about it, like this shirt. And there's like this constant danger that young people, you don't understand it, but you will as you get older, of just sort of wanting to stay there sometimes, of liking it so much. We're just going to keep going back to it, talking about it and trying to live in it and trying to relive it, at the risk oftentimes of being open to the future. So when my wife comments on my clothing, which she does a lot, she'll say, oh, you need to get some new clothes. And I'll be like, what? They wouldn't fit in my closet anyway, so why bother? And she's like, because you got a bunch of 25-year-old shirts you need to throw away. And I'm like, these things are, can I just tell you this? This is a side note. There's a real reason why I don't want to throw any of those shirts away, okay? The reason is because I take those clothes that aren't cool anymore, and I take them to Goodwill. You know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? A year from now, a bunch of 17-year-olds are going to go to Goodwill and be like, cool, retro, and wear it around. I'm like, I knew I should have kept it. I could have gone on a diet and fitted in that. I might have done it, But my closet is just full of the past sometimes. It's just full of things from the past. And oftentimes, it ends up being incapable of adding anything new in the future. I think if we're not careful, that can be true of us as a church. I used to work in Wichita, Kansas as a youth pastor at this old Methodist church. And when I say old, I want to clarify. There was this brick at the front door that said, established 1896. That's old. And sometimes I'd be like, it feels like we're still doing church like 1896 sometimes in here. Like there's this sense of like the past. I want to hold on to it. But if we're not careful as a church, we can become so stuffed full of old clothes, things we used to love so much, the things that mean so much to us, great memories of yesterday, that we find ourselves with no room or no space for what God wants to do today and tomorrow. And today we're finishing up this series of talks I've been doing where we've been looking at, in the book of Revelation, there's these quick little short messages that Jesus gives the Apostle John to different churches that existed in different cities in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, Greece, that area in the first century. And with each one, we've been asking the question of, in this season of change, and we are in a season of change. So if today, maybe when your first Sunday's with us, thanks for coming, great day to be here. But our lead pastor, Brandon, has stepped down and he's moving on to another location. We're looking for a new one and everything's changing. What's new, what's next? So we decided to take some time and say, let's look at these letters to these churches from 2,000 years ago and ask, is there something they want to speak to us? And we chose the word calibrate because it's this idea of I wanting to stay on course, wanting to make sure that I'm still headed in the direction, amidst the change, as things are becoming new and different, are we still going where we're supposed to be going? And each of these messages have sort of asked that question. Are we still headed in the right direction? Is the watch still, is it still, tuned properly and set up to make sure it's accurate and going the right way? And that's what these different messages do. So today we're going to end out this series with a short, I'm going to do 4 verses, with a letter to a church in a city called Sardis. And that was a church that existed in ancient Greece. And I just these quick few verses. And I believe they have a lot to say to us about what it means to be careful that our closet isn't becoming so full of the past that we can't find room for the future. And it starts this, and it'll be on the screen. You can follow along with me in Revelation chapter 3. He says, to the angel of the church in Sardis, which is his way of just saying, hey, church, people, these are the words of him who holds the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. John likes flowery language, but he's saying, I've heard from God, I want to talk to you. He says, I know your deeds, the things you do. You have a reputation for being alive. You have a reputation, a history. But in fact, you're dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains, but is about to die. For I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of my God. Remember, therefore, that what you have received and heard, hold it fast and repent. If you do not wake up, I will come like a thief. You will not know what time I will come to you. Let's pray and ask God to speak to us this morning. God, we come and we lay our lives before you. We surrender. We come to you and we say, God, what do you want? What are you saying to us? What are you speaking to us? Lord, I pray for all of us in this room this morning, listening, watching online, wherever, God, that your truth would come out and that you would align our lives properly with what you want for us, that we would see exactly where you're heading, where you're calling us to go, and we would follow at any cost. So speak to us from your word this morning. We're listening, God. Amen. All right. So what is the deal with this little church in the city we've never heard of called Sardis from 2,000 years ago? I actually want to explain Sardis by talking about a different city closer to us here in America 200 years ago. So I grew up in northwestern Illinois, right in the corner of Wisconsin, Iowa. And there's a small little town there. Wow, random. There's a small little town there called Galena, Illinois. Now, if you're like, I've never heard of Galena, don't be surprised. No one has. Galena is about 3,000 people, and it looks very, very similar to Julian. Galena is like this historic, old, there's 2 reasons to go to Galena, Illinois. Either you are with your grandma and you want to go buy antiques, sorry, grandma, or you're on a school field trip and they're wanting you to go visit all the historical sites. It's home to Ulysses S. Grant. It's all like, it's a tourist trap, basically. But it's not like a huge, famous tourist trap. It's just a little one out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, right up there by Iowa. You might say, well, okay, Pete, I've never heard of Galena. Who cares? Well, here's the thing that's interesting. They have a very interesting history. So Galena was established about 200 years ago, early part of the 1800s, and it was a town right on the edge of the Mississippi River, which of course connected tons of different parts of America at the time. And it was also sort of like a gateway or a step towards the ever-expanding West. So if you lived in the Eastern colonies in the 1700s, early 1800s, you actually would take something called the Stagecoach Trail, which would go through Galena, or you'd come up the Mississippi River to Galena, and then you would head west. So if you were to go back in time 200 years to this little sleepy town, little tourist trap called Galena, what you would actually find is a bustling metropolis at the heart of Western frontier. It was an important city. Like, people talked about it and knew it. It was close to Abraham Lincoln's home. It was like a big, important town. You're like, okay, well, what happened? Well, this is where the story gets interesting. So the Stagecoach Trail, we know what a stagecoach, right? Horses, right? They crossed the frontier. It had a hub in Galena. There came a moment in the early 1800s, though, when something started to shift in the world, in the culture, because these horse-drawn carriages started to look a little bit different when someone invented this thing called the steam engine. And so they eventually came to Galena and said, hey, Galena, you're right on the Stagecoach Trail. People got to go through your town to head west. The future is actually locomotion. And the people of Galena said, what? Who in their right mind would ever put a boot in one of those infernal contraptions? That's how they talked in Galena. And so the railroads came to them and said, we want to put a railroad where we want to basically connect you to the railroad. And they said, no, thanks. We'll stick to our good old-fashioned, tried and true horses. We don't need your fancy machines. So the railroad company did something interesting. They said, well, we want to go through that part of the country, so we just have to find another town that'll welcome us. And they looked on the map and they're like, oh, let's see, what other small little town what's this one here? Chicago. Okay, we'll go to Chicago. Anyone ever heard of Chicago? The Bears. Ever heard of Galena, Illinois? Isn't it interesting how one little town made one little decision that completely changed their future? And 200 years later, nobody knows what Galena, Illinois, or where it is. It's just a little tourist trap you have no reason to go to. Chicago is one of the major hubs of the Western Hemisphere because they embrace the future. You jump back in time with me 3,000 years to ancient Greece. There was a massive, sprawling empire called Lydia. This was before Alexander, way 1,000 years before Jesus. Lydia was the dominant force and dominant power of the world at the time. They were ahead of culture. They were the place to be. And their capital city, their Washington, D.C., their New York City was called Sardis. Sardis was the most dominant center of all culture, everything. So there are a few reasons. Number one, Sardis was home of culture. Sardis was actually where the Iliad, we believe, was written. So the story of, like, Homer wrote, you see the stories of Achilles, Troy, the Odysseys of Hercules, all this stuff came from Sardis. So it was a place where, like, all the culture was coming from it. Sardis was also on this massive cliff next to a river. And the cliff made them almost impregnable. You literally couldn't even reach Sardis from three halves of it, so no one could ever fight them militarily. They were dominant. And the river at the base was full of gold. So much gold that Sardis became the richest city in the world and invented the gold coin. They literally created the idea of, like, shaping it and giving people as money. And this river made all the ground around Sardis fertile. And so they had crops and money and power and everything. Its fame was legendary. If you were a Sardinian 3,000 years ago, you were a big shot. You were somebody. People are like, oh, so you're from Sardis, wow. And then this weird thing happens that happens to all of us. Time. Over time, a few things happened. First, the gold ran out. They used it all up. And suddenly they're not quite as rich as they used to be. And then the water actually began to ebb, and the water flow went down, and suddenly their land wasn't as fertile over the years. They weren't making as much crops. Culture began to move to other cities like Athens, and Alexander the Great came and established his own empire. Like, it all began to shift and change. A great earthquake hit and destroyed a bunch of their great buildings and architecture. And then at the very end, to make matters worse, Sardis was so confident in their past, they were so confident in their history, that no one could ever touch us. We're Sardis. They had actually stopped posting guards on their walls. And an invading army climbed up the cliffs at night like a thief, you notice that, and took over the capital, and that was the end of the Lydian Empire. And it was no longer a great, powerful city. So in the time of Jesus, in the first century, when they mentioned Sardis, it was actually often kind of a joke, because the people who still lived in Sardis still had it in their head that they were awesome. Like, we're Sardis. You know our history, but the rest of the world is like, you guys are a joke. People in Sardis, if I could make another old reference, were like Uncle Rico. You guys know from Napoleon Dynamite? You know where you're kind of cool in high school, but now you're 47 and, you know, the hair's not quite what it used to be, and, you know, you're like, oh man, in my glory days, coach would put me in the fourth quarter. I'd have won state championship, you know? Still throw that mountain. Like that kid, you know, you remember from high school, you guys aren't that old. The guy who was just like the cool prom king, you know, he's like quarterback, everybody loves him, and like he's just on top of the world. But then you fast forward like 30 years and it's like, hey buddy, how you doing? Things haven't gone well for him. What does he do? Just talks about the past. Oh, when I remember that time in high school. Remember that time we were 15? We did that. Oh man, it was so great back then. And he's just completely and utterly preoccupied with 1985. And in some ways, I think Jesus was giving a warning to the church and saying, hey, watch yourself. He says this, I know your deeds. You have a reputation. I know you were cool in high school. I know it used to be really great. I know you did some good things in the past. But the reality is you're not that anymore. You've lost something. You're dead. Just like the city of Sardis, Jesus was speaking to the church there, the Christians there. He was saying, just like the city you live in, there's a danger of getting so trapped in the glories of yesterday that you don't even realize you've lost all of your glory today. You can't see that the world has moved on. You're still living in the past. And the church there was in danger of falling into that trap, of being so overly comfortable, of being so safe, of having so much, oh, this shirt is so wonderful. I don't ever want to change. Listening to my favorite music, telling my favorite stories of everything that happened in the past. You ever get together with old friends and you tell all the stories about the past? That's good, right? I want to tell stories about the past. It's fun. But then there comes a moment where you're just like, do you have any new stories? Has anything good happened to you since high school? Or was that like the pinnacle of your existence? You just slowly let life pass you by and all you can talk about is what it was like 20 years ago. And so Jesus calls them and says, wake up, strengthen what remains. You're still alive. You're still alive. Wake up. I have found your deeds unfinished. I love that sentence. I have found your deeds unfinished. There's something I think God wants to speak to us to say, look, the past may have been great. Good things may have happened, but you are not done yet. You are not done yet. Your deeds will be unfinished until they put you in the ground. I still have things for you. Wake up, strengthen, stop living in the past. Stop putting all your focus on what came before and recognize there's still more to be done tomorrow. Yes, those stories were great, but God is saying, I have new stories for you. I have new things I want to do in your life. Wake up. It's not finished. And if you let yourself get too stuck in the past, just what you're used to, what's comfortable, all those great years way back when, the danger is that you'll never complete the task that God has put before you. The thing he's calling you to do today and tomorrow. You'll never have stories from now. It'll always be stories from then. So wake up, strengthen what remains today. Stand firm in what God has for you tomorrow. And so as I think about this idea of being calibrated as a church is like God saying, hey, listen, there were great days behind us. Incredible things. We have a great reputation. But we are not done yet. We're just getting started. And I want to stay in line with where God's sending us. And I believe that one way to stay aligned with where God is sending us is to be careful that we don't focus so much on the past that we miss the future. So I want to give you two things. And these both matter to me. And they're both important. And the first, I want you to know that I don't say that because I'm saying, well, just forget the past. The past is stupid. Don't worry about it. No. I actually do believe that part of moving forward is to remember and think about and honor the past. I do want to honor the past. So much has gone before us. Who this church is, why we're here, what brought us here, what God has done, the amazing people that have given their time and their lives to be a part of this. I think of the psalmist who says it this way. He says, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. I'm going to remember what you've done, God. I'm not going to forget about it. I will remember your miracles of long ago. I'll consider all your works and I'll meditate on your deeds. I will keep it in my head what has come before. I'll remember it and I'll hold to it. I'll honor it. He's not disregarding or forgetting the past, what's come before, right? Especially when what God has done, because remembering what God has done is often what fuels us moving forward. In the same way, I want to be a person who remembers the past and who honors it and who understands its goodness and what parts of it are so important to hold on to. I want to remember Mike and Colleen Crandall. Like, you guys, man, I'm not saying you're the past. I'm saying what you did here, right? What you did here. You're the past. No. But look, they're here doing the deeds of God. They haven't given up. They haven't stopped, right? 40 years they committed to this place. With some of you that were part of Harvest, they didn't say, oh, Rise is here, so we're all done. Bye, we'll go live in the past. No, they said, let's keep moving forward. Let's keep moving forward. God has great things for us in the future. And there were decades of people who committed themselves to this space and ministering to East County, who did wonderful and amazing things, and I want to honor them and remember their foundation. And today is kind of a weird day for me personally and all of us, because it's kind of my last day Mariah's on next week, and then Brandon's gone. And I just want to know, like, man, like, I want you guys to know, like, what Brandon has done here, I am so incredibly grateful for. Like, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And there are people that are watching online and don't even live here anymore. We would say, yeah, I'm still watching online because of what has been done, what the foundation there, what he and Jamie said yes to coming out here, choosing to give themselves away to this community, to all of us. I want to honor that. I don't ever want to forget it. And I can say so confidently, and you guys that know me, you know this, like, the last 11 years of my life are different because of Brandon. Being pastored by him, working for him, being friends with him, I'm a different person. And the last thing I'd ever want to do is just be like, oh, the past is stupid. No. There's something great about the past. There's something great about who we are. And as I was thinking about this, Brandon wrote us a letter when he was leaving, and I'm not writing a letter, but I was thinking, my wife asked me, she said, so what parts of the past do you most want to hang on to? Well, that's a good question. And so I made a list. This is just me talking, but I think you might resonate with some of this. What parts of the past have I got to hold fast to? Over the past 11 years, Brandon has helped me see that people are more important than the programs. And I don't ever want us to lose that. That's a part of our history and our past. That's a foundation that I don't ever want to take away from. He taught me that being kind is often greater and harder than being right. And if you guys know me, I like to be right. And that was something I had to learn. And it's something that defines this church, isn't it? I hear you guys say it all the time. Why do you like Rise City so much? I don't know. You guys just, it feels like we're a community that would rather be kind to each other sometimes than fight. And that comes from him. One of the hardest things I had to learn, because I'm greedy, is that generosity is a better way to live. I'm greedy because I'm always afraid I'm not going to have enough. I'm constantly like, oh, I'm going to run out. And 11 years with Brandon was like, just keep giving, Pete. Keep being generous. Trust God. And over the last 11 years, I've just seen God constantly provide every time. And I've seen generosity grow and grow. And that's part of our history we want to honor and continue. He taught me that being a leader isn't about what you can get people to do for you, but what you can do for people. And I just, you can't see it, but I just saw a bunch of heads go, yep, that's Brandon Grant. And that's part of our history. That's part of our heritage. It's part of our reputation that we cannot lose sight of. Brandon demonstrated to so many of you, including myself, that loving your family is the greatest achievement a man can accomplish. And Rise City Church will never stray from loving our families well. Personally, he taught me that having a head full of knowledge about ancient Greece doesn't mean a whole lot if my hands aren't willing to serve people. And that's hard because I know a lot about ancient Greece. And it doesn't mean anything if we don't love people. And I love how he taught all of us that a church exists to bring hope and healing to the world. And look, this isn't just a random list of stuff. This is a foundation. This is a history that has led to a good reputation, to good things. This is a history that has built something great, something that I'm proud to be a part of. And I'm so grateful that Brandon did that and put in the time and the work. I'm so grateful to be a part of a church that I'm proud of. I'm so grateful that I can look behind me for 11 years and see so many amazing stories, amazing things that God has done. That has such a good foundation. But can I just remind you real quick, the purpose of a foundation is to build on top of it. Not to get stuck and just stay in the basement. I know you Californians don't understand basements, but there are these things they dig in the ground, you build on top of them. You weren't made to stay in the foundation. The foundation is laid so we can move into the future. So we can honor the past and say, this is so important. These things should not be things in our past that we ever let go of. If these things become uncool in our culture, I don't care. If these things become things we run into, well, we actually, it'd be better, it'd be easier to do church this way. No. This is part of our history, part of our past that we need to hold on to and stay focused on. But at the same time, it's a foundation that God is calling us to build on. And so while we should honor the past and learn from it and hold to the things that are important, we have to choose to make room for the future. And it's a choice, guys. It's a choice. And this is where things get really hard. I love this shirt. I just really do. It's comfortable, reminds me of my great memories. Kind of hides that I've put on a lot of weight. At least I pretend it does. Whatever. I just love this shirt. But if my closet is so full of these shirts that there's no room for anything new, if I'm so completely comfortable and stuck in the way things have always been in the past, how great they were way back when, I'm gonna miss what God wants to do next. If I have no room in my closet for new clothes, God is like, I got so much more for you, Pete. And I just want you to hear, Rise City Church, God has so much more for all of you. And I don't know exactly what. I think about the prophet Isaiah writing in the Old Testament after things had completely fallen apart for the Jewish people and it was a mess. Will it ever get better? And Isaiah says this, see, I, speaking for God, am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you perceive it? You know why I think people often can't perceive a new thing? It's because they're so focused on the past. And Isaiah is saying it's probably not gonna look like it used to. And these people had 1,000 years of history, of traditions, of ways of doing things, rituals and laws, and this is everything. And they had all their psalm books and everything. This is how God does things. This is the way he works. So this will be how he works next time. And Isaiah says, actually, guys, God is about to do a new thing. And if you can't make room in your closet, you're gonna miss it. And what happened? A few hundred years later, the new thing shows up. And it looks so new. God in human flesh appears to them and says, I'm ready to start doing it. And it doesn't look anything like their old traditions. He doesn't look like the way they used to do church. It doesn't look like the way they used to pray and offer sacrifices. He's even saying things that feel uncomfortable and counter to their traditions. And their response is, you do not belong in our closet. And rather than embracing what God was doing and experiencing the greatest thing that ever happened in human history, they rejected him. He was too new, too different, and they weren't ready for it. They missed the greatest move of God in human history. And I do not want to make that mistake. And I have no idea what's coming next. I can't tell you I'm not Jesus. I don't know what the next 5, 10 years are gonna look like. I didn't know what this would look like 10 years ago. I don't know what tomorrow is gonna look like. But I have seen time and time again, God promise and answer, and every time it's amazing. Every time in my life that God has said, Pete, make some room, I'm about to do something. And I've said, okay, right here. He comes through and it's awesome. Time and time again, my God steps up and says, my future is gonna be incredible if you'll just trust me. And I have fear and insecurity. And I'm like, oh, what if it's not good? What if I don't like it? But I like the past. I was so cool. Did you see my hair, God? He's like, I did. Let it go. I have something better for you. Here's what I've learned, and I believe it with all my heart, Rise City Church. God's future is always brighter than my past. His future is always better than my past, always. And if I'm so stuck in my past, I'm gonna miss it. I can honor it. I can look back and say, that was good, that was great. But if I'm not willing to say, you know what, my reputations as a church, the history, our great achievements, all the stuff we used to do, it's good, and there's parts of it I like, but I'm not gonna be so tied to it, so beholden to it, that I'm gonna miss what God has next for me. I'm gonna surrender and lay it down and say, God, go ahead and shake things up. Go ahead and knock down any traditions you want. If there's anything we're doing that doesn't fit with what's coming next, break it up, take it away, I don't care. It's yours, God. Because I'm ready for something new. We need to be willing to surrender some of these old t-shirts in favor of something amazing that's coming. And I just want to say this again, guys, like, I love telling stories about the past. I do, I love it. I love reminding myself of all the goodness. And there's so many of us that could get in a room, get in a circle and be like, oh, remember in 2014? Oh, remember in 2016 when this happened? Remember during COVID, God did this thing and that thing? And that's great. The Bible calls us to remember that. It calls us to remember it. But I want some new stories. I don't want to spend my whole life just remembering things that were good. Past glories. Give me new stories, God. I will clean out, I'll throw everything away in my closet if it means you doing something great tomorrow and I don't have to live my life in the past. I want to live my life knowing that tomorrow can be even better and will be if I trust and obey God. Rise City Church, God has great things for this church. I believe it. I don't know what it is, but I believe it's great. And I believe he's calling us to say, guys, will you trust me? Will you stay on course? Will you stay on course and say, wherever I go, wherever I step, follow me? It might look weird. It might look different. It might not be what you want. It might not look by the past. It probably won't look like the past. But if you trust me and you follow me,